Hi guys, how you doing? Great to be here in UCD again. With a comprehensive intro like that, he's kind of gone over half my material, so might end up faster than I thought. So my name is Ed, that's my ridiculously long surname, so we'll just call me Ed. If you're on Twitter at all, this is where you can find me. You can tweet nice things about me, tweet nasty things about me, or tweet anything you like. So yeah, I actually went to UCD. I finished up in 2008 with a Bachelor of Commerce degree. And it was there that I became a certified PowerPoint nerd. A lot of the courses had a big aspect of the grading that was practical projects that had presentations. And I really wanted to learn how could I get the message across in a simple manner, in a manner that would be understood. And again, that was not like the regular academic presentations you see. So I actually ended up on the front page of the Irish Times business section once upon a time. I went to an international case study competition. Representing the college. That's me when I was lighter and less hairy. I wasn't appreciating this professional photo shoot. As you can see, it was a really cliche professional photographer and he was just asking too much of us. So I finished in 2008 with my degree and I decided I'd take up a job with a pharmaceutical company. So I was there for 6 months on a special project. And my first encounter with the real world showed me that most slides look kind of like this. You know, people were standing in front of their thing, reading directly off it. Everyone in the room was bored. Nothing was really getting said. So I thought, you know, something's wrong here. And what was wrong was that most of their branding stuff looked like this. It looked professional, it looked like they knew what they were doing. Same with their website. They'd put a lot of effort into their website, deciding what it should look like, what content is suitable to be there, what content shouldn't be there. Again, same stuff with the print material. So any brochures they had or anything like that had, you know, gone to an expert. They'd been advised on what will work, what won't work. But when it came to presentations, it was just like some kid had kind of thrown it together, or some kind of disgruntled intern had done it the night before the big presentation. And that's kind of because a lot of the times a disgruntled intern had done it the night before a presentation. So, you know, it wasn't top quality material. So in my spare time, I was making presentations and uploading them to SlideShare because that's how cool I am. And I finished in the top 10 in the World's Best Presentation Contest in 2009 and 2010. And I decided, okay, maybe I'm somewhat good at this and I'll try and make a living out of it. So, as David said, I've worked with guys who presented at conferences like TechCrunch. So, you know, this is in front of some really big investors and gets great media coverage. So when startups have an important presentation, that's usually where I help them out. So, what's the big deal with presentations? Like, why are they so important? Well, they're important for a few reasons. The first is, as Seth Godin would put it, ideas that spread win. And unless you structure your material and your presentation in a way that's easy to understand and that people can remember, then it's just not going to spread. As George Burns put it, a person can have the greatest idea in the world, but if that person can't convince enough other people, then it doesn't matter. So I mean, you might have a terrific idea, you might be working on it 24/7 and it might be a world-changing thing, but when you get in front of an investor or a potential customer or a decision maker that you need to convince, all they're seeing is the presentation. They're seeing 10 minutes of material, 15 minutes of material, so you need that presentation to represent all the hard work that you've been putting into it. And of course, first impressions count. So, as I say, you've been working on whatever it is you've been working on, an idea, a concept, a product, but the chances are the first time someone's ever going to come across you is in a presentation. So the presentation basically is your product as far as they're concerned. And again, it's your opportunity to stand out from the crowd. If you know, judges or customers or investors are going to be seeing multiple presentations in one day and you can really knock their socks off and come to them with a really well prepared presentation, you're really going to stand out from the crowd. Conversely, if you turn up with a presentation that's kind of half-assed and it's obvious you haven't rehearsed it and you haven't thought it through, you're going to really stand out for being pretty much disrespectful to them for not putting in the work that's needed. So presentations are important, but at the end of the day, most people kind of end up something like this, kind of halfway through the presentation. They've really had enough and they don't want to see any more. And what we actually need them to be more like is something like this. Totally buying into what your idea is, totally buying into your product, seeing you as a brilliant investment. So how can we change all this? Well, there's three kind of main areas that we can look at, and the first of which is structure. So how are we going to structure the information? How are we going to make it clear? How are we going to decide what goes in and what we're getting rid of? The second is how can we put a set of visuals behind that to communicate the message clearly and in a kind of an engaging manner. And the final one is some other stuff at the end that I'll talk about that kind of are the few last bits and pieces you have to put together to make sure you've got a great presentation. So the first section, structure. And the beginning question you should always ask is, why are you presenting? Now, I know that might seem like a kind of a crass and obvious question, but when you force yourself to sit down and really think about, what do I want the audience to come away with at the end of this? Like, what are the 3 things? If they could only remember 3 things, what is it going to be? And thinking through what specifically you want the outcome to be at the end of the presentation. And what that's going to involve is tailoring your message. A lot of people think that they can make one presentation and it's going to sing to all different types of audiences. So I'm going to make a presentation for investor, but that'll also be good for the customer or also good for my colleague. Trying to make one kind of presentation that solves all these or speaks to all these audiences is not a good idea. So you're going to have to tailor your message for each audience. So when you're talking to, for instance, a client, what you're doing is you're selling benefits, not features. So a lot of times with technology and science-based stuff, it can be easy to get into talking about specifications and talking about the kind of little bits of how it works, but most of the time an end customer or client doesn't want to hear that. So in a real world situation, we don't call it cold dead fish. So that's a description of what we're looking at here. Instead, we call it healthy sushi. So we're talking about, what it is, and what it means to the person rather than what the actual workings of it are. Again, we don't call it horse meat in a can. We call it gourmet meal for your companion. So, there's different ways of packaging things that'll appeal to people. So you shouldn't just go for the features, talk about what it means. I don't think horse meat in a can would sell too well. So in terms of the investor view, I was at the last talk of the Art of the Start series with Gary Layden, and he basically said that we don't really care what your ideas are. Everyone has ideas and everyone thinks their idea is the next big thing. What we want to see is that you have a business model that can make money out of it and you have a team that can execute it. So again, this is about tailoring, right? So for the client, we're talking about benefits. For the investor, we're talking about what they want to see. So what they want to see is how you're going to make money and prove to us you have the right guys. In terms of how many messages you can fit into a presentation, about 3. 3 is about the major amount you can fit in, so that you can address 3 major areas and try and give people 3 main takeaways. And in an ideal world, getting your presentation to 20 minutes or below is the ideal situation. No one's ever going to give out to you for your presentation being too short. In actual fact, most presentations run far, far too long. So what this means is you're going to have to do a little bit of curation. So if we think about the art gallery as an example, right, they generally tend to look somewhat the same. So you got kind of neutral looking walls, neutral looking floor, and a few kind of well chosen pieces spaced out so that each image or each piece of art is easy to take in and read a little bit about it. Now we could stick stuff all over the wall, we could throw a few more on wherever there's space, we could, throw a few on the floor, nail one to the ceiling. But then it just becomes distracting and it's too much. So when you're thinking about what messages you want in your presentation, you kind of have to think like a curator in an art gallery. Now, what curators in an art gallery have is a back room where they store all their ideas, right? Or all their pieces of art. So this is what you need to do with your presentation. You need to choose, based on the audience, what are the most suitable pieces at any one time. And a good tip is to not start directly at the computer. Sometimes when you find out you have a presentation, it's very tempting to kind of sit down at the desk and just start banging out bullet points. This is not really a pretty good way to do it. I always find if you get out, go for a walk, clear your head, get your creativity flowing, it's a far better way of starting the process of thinking what needs to go into your presentation. And using simple language is very important. So, you might be talking about a very complex area, but you have to assume that the people in the audience may have no idea what you're talking about. So you kind of have to cater to that fact. So how do you do that? You do it by really trying hard to put yourself in beginner's shoes. Think about what it's like for someone who has no idea what you're talking about. And revisit the terms that you were going to use or the analogies you were going to use and see, really try and think like, if I had no idea about this, would this make sense to me? So one example of a situation where we use simple language was when I worked with a company called bandauction.net, and we came up with the tagline, the eBay for buyers and sellers of live music. So here we're not using big complicated words, and what we're actually doing is we're also using a reference that people are familiar with. So by using the reference of eBay, most people know what eBay is. Instantly, they know in their head, okay, I know roughly what these guys do. Now, we could have gone for a more kind of stuffy explanation of it. You know, we could have called it an e-commerce platform for the facilitation of musical events through dynamic database-driven relationships. Kind of describing the same thing, but a little bit more stuffy and a lot less friendly. So what we have to try and do is create a story. And stories are easy to remember. They're easy for your audience to understand. And I'm just going to show you two examples that I did for clients recently. The first is a company called Tempity, and what they do is they match people who are looking for temps with those who are looking to do temp work. And what we do is we set up a really kind of oversimplified but real world situation where we say, imagine you're the boss and you come into work on a Monday morning and you actually get this text and it's from your PA and she says, you know, I'm sick, the doctor says it's the flu, I'm not going to be in until Wednesday. So what does that mean for you, the manager? So here we're going to talk about what the pain is for the person in question. So for the manager, it means the morning's ruined. They're going to be spending their morning doing these three things that they don't particularly want to be doing and they don't get paid for. It's also a pain for this guy. He's their recruiter, so now he has to find the right people and he has to find when they're available. And if he has to do this for multiple clients, then you know it's a headache on a grand scale. So we've kind of outlined what the pain is for these two people with a really simple story, and then we're saying, and our product to the rescue. So you know, you say what the problem is, say what the pain is, and then you talk about why your solution is so great and fantastic. As Dave said, I worked with these guys, TrustDev. What they do is real-time online identity verification. So they're kind of stopping fraudsters. And because most people might not think about this on a day-to-day basis, again, we're going to come up with this really easy story. And we're saying that this guy, Pat, decides he wants to set up an online Rolex store. The next day, luckily, this random billionaire comes along and decides he wants one of these nice watches. So he spends 20,000 on one. So Pat's pretty happy about this. For him, the job is done. Or is it? Because up to 180 days later, Bank of Ireland can say, sorry about that, that was a fraudulent transaction, so we're going to be taking our money back. So what does this mean for Pat? Who takes the hit? Well, the bank never takes the hit. They're getting their money back. The fraudster has a pretty nice watch. And poor old Pat has nothing except more penalties, fees and charges. So again, we're going through this really simplified story to help people who may never have thought about online fraud understand what the problem is. So we're saying, trust dev to the rescue. So yeah, getting a story, a really simple story can help people really remember what your content is. So the second section here is about visuals. And the first thing to say is that the visuals are for your audience. They're not supposed to be, you know, a teleprompter. You see some people when they're nervous and they haven't prepared for a presentation, they literally stand at the desk, at the laptop reading out really long bullet points, and there's nothing less engaging than that. But it's okay to have a screen within your view. So this is the masterful Steve Jobs, and here we have not one but two screens, so you can see what's on the screen behind him, what's coming up next. And that's okay, and both PowerPoint and Keynote have a version, or have a mode where you can do that. One's called Presenter View, I think the other is probably also called Presenter View. And this is a question I get a lot: how many slides is the right number of slides? So a lot of people say you should only ever have 10 slides, and then some people say you should only ever have 20 slides with 30 size font and all this. My rule is a bit looser. Mine is use as many as you need. If someone was to hazard a guess, can you tell me how many slides I'm on right now?
35.
How many?
35.
35? Anyone else?
50.
79. So 79 academic slides that you're used to would be awful, but this is a bit lighter and a bit zippier. So, you know, slide count is the wrong metric to measure how long your presentation is. Presentations are like a pie. You can split the pie as many ways as you like, it's still a pie. If it's a big pie, you might need to cut it a lot. So then I just have a few visual tips in terms of slides. The first one is to get rid of the logo. People, for whatever reason, love putting logos in corners. This is like a template that I actually worked with. It was vibrant red, so I had to anonymize it somewhat. But you know, you got one logo here, the exact same logo here, another logo and weird strapline here. And what it actually means is that we're left with this much workable space to change on any given slide. And if you're going to restrict yourself down to that much space, it's just not really a smart decision. If we look at Steve Jobs, again, you know, you wouldn't see an Apple logo on every slide. Jeff Bezos here, you know, if there's a logo, we got a Kindle logo, but it makes sense because there's a Kindle there. And Seth Godin, again, really minimalist slides, just really clean and clear. You don't see his, you know, website address in the corner or on the bottom. Now, it's fine to have branding at the start of a presentation, at the end of a presentation, but having it on every slide is overkill, in my opinion. The second visual tip is using the right fonts. The most basic level here is having something that's legible. You sometimes get these people using these weird novelty fonts that nobody's ever used before. There's probably a reason why they've never used them before. So we're aiming to be kind of like a road sign. You know, we got big clear font on a high contrast background. Same with a billboard. You know, we got big font, high contrast, good image there, and they're designed to be read from a distance. A good guide on what not to do is looking at when companies don't want you to be able to read text. So when they've got something like this and they don't want you to really know how legally screwed you are. So, you know, what they do is they make it tiny, they make it all caps, and they make it bold. So, you know, we could make it bigger. We could take it off all bold. We could take it off all caps. Becomes a little bit easier to read. Or we could distill it down to the true meaning of it, which would do everyone a better service. It's also worth saying that fonts say something about you. They say something about your organization or your brand. There's a reason why Coca-Cola choose a typeface that looks like this. They want to be cool, they want to be useful and fun times and all that. And KPMG want to be accountants. And you know, so they choose a font that looks like this and an image that looks like this. It might look weird if you had like an antique business and had this kind of modernish looking font. And it might also look out of kilter if you had, you know, this cloud technology company and you're using some medieval script font. Just doesn't jive. The one time you're allowed to use Comic Sans, the only time is when you run a creche, I think. And it wouldn't look so good if you ran a funeral home. No one's going to go there. Just in terms of font size as well, you should design for the person at the back of the room. Who's to say that at, let's say, a large conference or whatever, the most important person might be the person who came in last and they happen to be sitting at the back, and they're no less deserved of being able to understand what your slides are all about. So I mean, ideally, if you know where you're going to present, you could check out the room, sit at the back, put some slides up and see what it looks like from the back. In general, people design stuff too small, so when in doubt, design too big. Third visual tip is to use the right images. So there's a great book by a guy called John Medina, and he says if you give someone a piece of information alone, it has about a 10% recall rate after 3 days. But if you were to combine that with a strong relevant image, that goes up to about 65%. So what is a strong relevant image? It's not clip art, none of these. And it's not low res, so you see a lot of people, they do find an okay image, but it's really fuzzy. If you spend a little bit more time, you can come up with one that's a lot crisper and clearer. Don't use stolen stuff, so you see a lot of people using ones that have kind of watermarks on it. It looks cheap, it looks horrible, and you've technically committed theft. If you've got a good image, like let's say we're trying to extol the virtues of visiting Patagonia, don't hide it in the corner of a slide, just let it be the whole slide. And talk around that. You don't need to have the text if you're delivering it live. Same with if you're trying to show a bit of software or a screenshot, don't have it hiding in the weird triangle code template, just make it the whole screen. There's no need for all this nonsense. So these are some slides I created with David back in the day. We were just talking about scientific problems of the day. So instead of just having bullet points, we're actually showing kind of full screen images with a bit of text. You know, so we're saying the water levels are going to be rising, the bees are all dying out, and this many Americans are obese. So a tip I have with images as well is where possible, make it real. So, you know, especially I get a lot of startup presentations and they're talking about their team and they use a slide that looks like this and it's kind of blatantly off like a stock photography website. Instead, just get a good high quality shot of yourselves. So these are the Tempety guys. So this is the actual team. You know, this is their marketing person. She's the CEO. She does the UX design, and this guy who wasn't there on the day was their CTO. So by making it real, I think it makes it more memorable, and people like seeing real people. So where can you get good images? Canstockphoto.com is a good place. The images aren't free, but they're a lot cheaper than iStock, and a lot of the time they're literally the same photo as an iStock one, so they're about a quarter the price. Good thing with sites like this is you can search by model, so if you're trying to tell the story of this poor lad, he's very angry and then he gets even sadder and then at the end he's happy. So you can search by model, and it lets you have some consistency. Flickr.com, another great place to find stuff. For instance, if you wanted a cool picture of an eagle, you get this one. Even if you were to crop in on this area here, it's still kind of high res and nice and crisp. So yeah, you can find great images there as well. So the next tip is to step away from the animations. Now, every version of PowerPoint and Keynote that comes out, there's more and more animations, and they kind of get weirder and more distracting and crazy. So these are just some of the ones that Keynote allows you to do for some reason. The older versions of PowerPoint, they had really clunky ones, and they look like something out of the old series of Batman, like where there's, Zorp pop and all this. And then, Keynote allows you to do truly bizarre things, and you see people using them like they think it's some sort of cool thing that's going to really enhance their presentation, but it rarely does. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the works of Michael Bay, the movie guy. His movies are kind of all explosions, and that is the plot. So that's kind of what like overuse of animations and transitions are. It's kind of trying to distract from the fact you don't have a plot by just having explosions. So I use stuff like fade, it's pretty exciting. Or if I'm feeling extra saucy, I might use push up. So if we're talking about a long panning slide, we got something like this, so we're saying we're starting at the bottom and we're going to the top, so we got this kind of long slide thing going on. Push to the side is also pretty good. You can use this for like timelines. So in year 1 we did Y, in year 2 we did X, and then in the final year we did this. So that's actually quite good for timelines. So using transitions for a purpose, for a reason, is a smart thing to do, but just kind of throwing random ones in to jazz up your presentation is not really the right way to do it. Anticipating that I'll get a question on Prezi, I've decided to dedicate a slide to it. Just say no to Prezi. Prezi kind of strips out the functionality that's good of PowerPoint and Keynote and just adds loads of mad zooming and panning and animations. And in general, I say use whatever software tool you're most familiar with and is good for you, but you should also use the one that works for everyone. I mean, pretty much everybody has a version of PowerPoint on their computer, and you want to be assured that if you send someone a presentation that they can open it. If I send someone a Keynote presentation off my Mac, they might not be able to open it. The fifth tip is to use the right charts for your data. So when you are using a chart to show data, just make sure that it's doing an honest and good job of displaying that data. So when in doubt, my mantra is just keep it simple. So there's a little quiz here. In the next slide, which is bigger, B or F? Anybody? The same? So the problem is, and this is a default chart in Keynote, they allow you to make this marble thing, and it's always at 3D, and making graphs 3D is distorting to the data. So first of all, let's get rid of the weird marble colors, and we'll just change it to normal colors. That might make it a little bit easier. Maybe if you were to make the chart 2D, it would make it easier. So now it's pretty clear, it might be F. If you make it a bar chart, then it's very clear. And if we were to grey out the areas that aren't important and just compare the two, if I ask you now which is bigger, B or F, I suppose it's F. So this is where we started, kind of with this marble monstrosity thing going on, and this is the alternative. So something clear and something that accurately depicts what the data is. So the other tip is, and the final tip is that one size never fits all. So a lot of the times people say to me, okay, I like the visual style and all that, but people said I had to send them on or have to print out the deck and give it to them. And if I was to print out the deck, we're at slide 156 here. It would be kind of like a big novel you're bringing around. Well, the truth is that a PowerPoint presentation and a Word document are very different. What people are referring to in that case is kind of a Word document, right? So if you're designing something to be a readable document, by definition it's going to be really poor at being a live presentation, and kind of vice versa. So what that means is that if it really means something to you and it's an important presentation, you have to design two different presentations. You have to design one that's going to be great for live purposes, and another document that's very good at being a readable document. So never try and achieve both with one document. So just in terms of the other stuff, the kind of final pieces that contribute to a great presentation, rehearsal is incredibly important. Most people aren't that comfortable giving presentations, myself included, and one way to make yourself comfortable is to rehearse the damn thing to death. As Michelangelo put it, if people only knew how hard I worked to gain my mastery, it wouldn't seem too wonderful at all. And again, the Steve Jobs example here is a good one. He used to rehearse for 2 or 3 days before a big presentation. Now, some people will look through their slides kind of once or twice at their desk. He went through full run-throughs of kind of hour or 2 hour long keynotes, came up with backups for if something went wrong and backups for those backups. And you know, that's the sort of preparation you need if you want a presentation to come across as good. A lot of people then say, oh, well, when I practice too much, I don't come across naturally or whatever. And I don't think that's true, really. If you look at a comedian, I don't know if you're familiar with George Carlin, one of my favorite comedians, or any actors, they rehearse everything to death. Like, it's actually all totally scripted, but when you see them, it appears natural. I remember the first time I saw the same George Carlin gig that he did at 2 different places, and my mind kind of exploded when I figured out that he wasn't making it all up as he went along, that actually this was this like highly scripted thing. It's actually kind of disappointing when you figure that out. But that's kind of, you know, you do have to treat it like an actor treats a script if you want to come across as natural. And a real rehearsal is out loud. So rehearsal isn't sitting at your desk, at your laptop, kind of clicking through your slides, thinking like, all right, I got this down. When you stand up, even if it's in a room on yourself and you say things out loud, you suddenly realize like the joke you thought was brilliant doesn't make sense, or the turn of phrase that was going to really wow the audience just sounds pretty stupid. If you can do it in front of people, that's even better. If you've got some friends who are going to give you some constructive criticism, definitely do it in front of them. And you know, minimum I'd say do kind of 4 or 5 out loud run-throughs of your presentation, and then when you stand up to deliver the presentation, you'll be pretty versed on how it goes, and it'll come across great. The other thing to assume is that something will go very, very wrong. You know, it could be that you turn up to present somewhere, you try and turn on your computer, nothing's happening, you just keep getting a black screen. What are you going to do? Are you going to just go home and cry, or I don't know what? So you got to bring at least one backup, at least have it on a USB key, maybe have it on 2, you might break one USB key on the way there. Have it online somewhere, so put it up on Dropbox, put it up on SlideShare, so if some nice person in the audience can lend you their computer, then you can do that. And you know, have a worst case scenario, have a paper-based backup, and I don't mean a printout of the slides, but some sort of structure that you can look at to keep you going. Because for all you know, the electricity is going to go out, the projector is going to break, and again, you know, it'd be better that you do something rather than kind of just go home. Another tip is to get a presentation remote. Like most places will provide them. I think you guys do have one, but you again have to assume that they won't. By having a clicker, it means you can kind of go through things easier instead of kind of being stuck at the laptop, kind of clicking the next button. Some people like to go kind of strolling around as they present, and again, this has range to about 50 feet. I could present from the back of the room if I wanted. But it allows you a degree of freedom. You don't have to be tethered to the computer if you don't want to. They're about €40, but you know, if you're going to present with any sort of regularity, I'd invest in one of them. Final tip is don't forget to share the presentation. So I think SlideShare is a great mechanism to share content. My most viewed SlideShare has 114,500 views or more. That's like a new camp and a Thomond Park. I'm never going to present to that many people live. I'm not going to meet that many people ever live. So it just gives your presentation a lot of reach. It gives it more lifespan. You know, you might present to a room of 50 people, but you might put it online and get a few thousand views. So you know, if you can get more lifespan out of it, all the better. So that's pretty much it. That's all I got for you today. If there's more questions, any questions, I'll take them now, or I guess I'll be around after. And if you want to harass me with emails or tweets or anything, this is where you'll find me. So thank you very much.